At 58, I had everything: corner office, seven-figure salary, stock options, and a seat at the table where global decisions were made. But then my daughter left a note on my empty desk that shattered everything I believed in. "You never saw me dance, so you don't deserve to know where I live." In that moment, the silence in the house wasn't just quiet. It was proof of my absence. I had spent 3 decades building a reputation, managing billions, launching pharmaceutical empires. Yet I couldn't recall the last time I hugged Clara without looking at my watch. I missed every recital, every parent night, every fever, every broken heart. I watched her grow up through photos on Emily's phone while I flew business class to nowhere that mattered. The pain wasn't just guilt. It was vacancy. My daughter had become a stranger by my own design. My wife, once my best friend, had forgotten the sound of my laughter. And me? I had built a castle of success and found myself king of an empty throne. But something happened. A video, a letter, a chance, and I realized it's never too late to try again. Even if they won't open the door, you can still stand outside every day to show them you've changed. If you've ever put work before the people you love, don't scroll away. This isn't just my story. It might be your warning. I was born in Akron, Ohio, in the middle of winter, in a 1-bedroom apartment where the heating worked half the time. My father walked out when I was 6. He left a note, a half-packed duffel bag, and an overdue electric bill. My mother worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to keep the lights on. She'd come home smelling like hospital antiseptic or burger grease, depending on the week. I never blamed her for the exhaustion in her eyes or the silence during dinner. She was trying, always trying. I remember nights curled up in bed, hearing the wind cut through the cracks in the windows, praying for a life that didn't feel like survival. I'd whisper promises into the dark. One day, I'll have enough. One day, my family will never feel cold again. I clung to those promises like armor. Scholarships were my ticket out. I didn't party in college. I studied, I calculated, I climbed. That's where I met Emily, bright, kind, magnetic. She could have chosen anyone. But she chose the quiet boy who always sat front row and smelled faintly of library books. We fell in love not in bursts, but in steady, intentional steps. She was the first person who ever asked me what I wanted, not what I could provide, not how I could fix something, just me. We married the summer after graduation. We didn't have much. Hand-me-down furniture, a second-hand car with a busted air conditioner. But we had each other, and dreams. God, did we have dreams. We talked about raising kids who knew security, not scarcity. We promised Sunday pancakes, bedtime stories, and never missing a recital or soccer game. When Clara was born, I held her like she was made of glass. She had Emily's eyes and my stubborn frown. I looked into her face and swore, with the kind of conviction that only first-time fathers understand. I will never disappear on you. Not like he did. My first job was as a junior financial analyst at a mid-size healthcare company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. I worked late, but Emily understood. We were building something. I told myself the extra hours were for her, for Clara, for the life we were creating, and for a while, I believed it. Then came the offer, from a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical firm based in Boston. They were impressed with my numbers, my efficiency, my ability to forecast financial storms. The salary tripled what I was making. Stock options, relocation package, a real shot at the life I'd always wanted. Emily hesitated. "It's a big move," she said, rocking Clara in her arms. "Is it worth uprooting everything?" kissed her forehead. It's for us. For her. This is how I make sure she never knows what it's like to go to bed hungry. We moved. The apartment turned into a townhouse, the beat-up sedan into a leased luxury SUV. My suits started fitting better. My title grew every year. Senior analyst, then director, then vice president of global finance. By the time Clara was in kindergarten, I was managing international portfolios and speaking at conferences in Singapore and Zurich. But somewhere in that ascent, something subtle shifted. The Sunday pancakes became hotel breakfasts. The bedtime stories turned into quick phone calls from airport lounges. I still promised, still meant it. Next week, sweetie, I'll make it up to you. Daddy's closing a big deal. Emily never nagged, never yelled. She just adjusted. She took over drop-offs and recitals, doctor appointments, and school forms. She learned to smile alone in family photos. I told myself we were a team, that this was temporary, that the payoff was coming. What I didn't realize, what I wouldn't admit, was that I was already inside the cage I had built. Gold-plated, yes. Adorned with titles and paychecks and applause. But a cage nonetheless. It's funny in hindsight, how you can chase something so hard and never notice the walls closing in. How ambition can sound noble until it drowns out everything else. I thought I was protecting my family by being absent. I thought providing was enough. I thought being better than my father just meant not walking out the door. I didn't realize that vanishing in a suit and tie still counts as leaving. Clara was 8 when she got cast as a sunflower in her first school recital. She came home beaming, cheeks flushed, yellow construction paper petals already half torn from where she'd hugged them too tight. "Daddy," she said, arms wrapped around my waist before I could even take off my tie. "I'm going to dance on stage. Will you come watch me?" I glanced at my phone, already buzzing with emails from Singapore. I smiled. Of course I'll be there. Wouldn't miss it for the world. And I meant it. At that moment, I meant it. But 2 days before the recital, the VP of strategy pulled me into a war room meeting. The company was considering a global acquisition. I was one of 3 people invited to pitch a transition plan. The meeting was set for the same evening as Clara's performance. I paced my office for an hour, calendar open, Clara's name written in purple marker beside a little hand-drawn sun. I told myself I'd try both. I'd present, then rush to the school. Boston traffic had other plans. I called Emily 15 minutes before the show started. "Tell her I'm so sorry. I'll make it up to her, I promise." There was a pause. Then her voice, calm even. "I know you will. Maybe not next time, but someday." She didn't sound angry. That was the part that stung. When I got home that night, Clara was already in bed. On the kitchen table sat a plastic sunflower crown and a cupcake with my name on it, untouched. The next morning, Clara avoided eye contact. "It's okay, Daddy," she said, not looking up from her cereal. "Work is more important." I laughed awkwardly. "No, sweetheart, it's not. I just had something urgent. Next time, it's okay," she repeated, this time with a strange, practiced calm. I didn't cry. That should have been the warning. But I was too busy congratulating myself for raising a resilient kid to see the quiet erosion underneath. The next few months blurred into promotions, business travel, late nights. Clara stopped asking if I was coming to things. School assemblies, talent shows, even parent-teacher conferences. Emily picked up the slack, always smiling for photos, always texting me updates like I was some distant uncle instead of her husband. But something else had changed. Clara had always been expressive, animated, full of energy. Suddenly she became quieter, more deliberate. She'd spend hours in her room with the door shut, but not doing homework. I figured it was just a phase, preteens and moods, right? One night, around midnight, I passed by her door and heard her speaking softly, like she was reading from a script. Curious, I pushed the door open just a crack. She sat on her bed, holding up her iPad like a camera, backlit by a tiny desk lamp. And this week, I asked my dad if he remembered the name of my dance teacher, she was saying. He didn't. I wasn't surprised. He remembers the names of CEOs from Japan and the stock price of our company in 2009, but not the woman who's been teaching me since I was 5. I froze. I think, Clara continued, that when you stop expecting someone to show up, it hurts less when they don't. She pressed pause. The screen went dark. I closed the door quietly, heart thudding, shame crawling up my spine. I never told her I'd heard, and she never told me she was recording. Over the next few weeks, I noticed her videos more, subtle moments. She'd sit at the dinner table with her iPad propped up, recording herself talking about her day while I answered emails 3 feet away. I was there, but not in her world. The worst part? I thought I could fix it with grand gestures. I bought her the latest tablet for her birthday, wrote her a long card about how proud I was. She smiled politely, then handed the iPad to Emily and said, "I'll open it later." Later never came. Clara's vlog remained private. She never shared it, never posted online. It wasn't about likes or followers. It was about memory. Her memory. Her version of our family. One where I was always a background blur. I didn't realize it at the time, but she had already started grieving a father who was very much alive. And me? I was still chasing a dream I didn't know was already leaving me behind. By the time Clara turned 10, she no longer asked for help with anything. She packed her own lunch, laid out her clothes, walked to the bus stop without saying goodbye. I'd catch glimpses of her through the window, backpack nearly tipping her over, headphones in, face unreadable. At first, I told myself this was independence, a good thing, evidence that Emily and I had raised a capable, self-sufficient child. But deep down, I knew better. She stopped bringing me permission slips to sign. When I asked about her dance classes, she shrugged. "It's fine," she'd say. "Same as always." But it wasn't. I just didn't realize how different everything had become. Emily adjusted too. Quietly, skillfully, she started keeping her own calendar on the fridge, a color-coded system with stickers and hand-drawn stars for Clara's events. It used to be synced with my work calendar. Now she didn't bother. "Did you tell me Clara's recital was next week?" I asked once, staring at a pink heart sticker on the Wednesday square. Emily looked up from her coffee. "It's been on the fridge for a month." I opened my mouth, then closed it. She wasn't being passive-aggressive. She was just done reminding me. Dinners changed too. The 3 of us used to eat together. Now, I often found my plate in the microwave, covered in foil. They'd already eaten, cleaned up, and were watching a show or working on school projects when I came in. I'd try to join, sometimes. "What are you 2 watching?" I asked one night, loosening my tie. Clara paused the screen and said, "We already started. Maybe next time, Dad." She said it without malice. That's what stung the most. No anger, just acceptance. That night, I walked past her room and saw the door open slightly. She was editing a video. Her voice filled the hallway, gentle but firm. "Today, Mom and I made pancakes. I flipped one too high, and it hit the ceiling." She giggled. "We laughed so hard. Dad didn't see it. He was on a call with Singapore. Again. I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes. She wasn't angry at me. She had simply recalibrated her expectations. I was no longer someone she waited for. I was just someone who used to promise a lot. Twist 2 came not from Clara, but from my own mother. She called one evening out of the blue. "I watched Clara's video today," she said. I blinked. "Video?" Her voice crackled. "You didn't know? She's been sending me private links for months, sort of like a diary, but in video form." I sat down slowly. She never mentioned it. "She's very honest in them," my mother added carefully. "Not cruel, just observant. You might want to watch them." "I would," I said, "if I'd been given the links." There was a long pause. "I don't think they're meant for you," she said. I didn't sleep that night. Clara had built a world where I didn't exist, and my mother had been invited inside, while I stood at the window, peering in. In that house, I was no longer daddy. I was the man who paid the bills, whose briefcases collected dust in the corner, whose presence was acknowledged but not required. They laughed without me, ate without me, told stories I didn't understand, repeated inside jokes I'd never heard. And when I asked, they'd smile politely, then change the subject. Even our dog, Max, started following Emily more. One Saturday morning, I came downstairs and found Emily and Clara making waffles. Music was playing. Clara was dancing barefoot, batter on her nose. They looked like a postcard, warm, glowing, alive. "Smells good," I said. They both turned, smiled. Clara handed me a plate. I sat down, trying to join the conversation. "Did you hear what happened at the board meeting last week? Our CEO?" Emily cut in gently. "Let's talk about something fun." Clara nodded. "Yeah, work is kind of boring." I blinked. "Right, sorry." They returned to their conversation like I hadn't spoken. And in that moment, I realized I was a guest in my own family. Polite, tolerated, but not essential. At work, I was indispensable. At home, I was optional. It started with an email. The subject line was in all caps. "Family dinner, no excuses," sent by Emily, 8:03 a.m., the Monday before Clara's birthday. Inside was a simple message. "Clara wants to have dinner together. Home by 6 a.m., just us, no phones. If you're late, don't come home at all." It wasn't a threat. Emily didn't do ultimatums. But this was something else. I stared at the screen, stunned, then reread the message 5 times. Part of me wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because of the absurdity. My wife, the same woman who used to warm my dinner and say, "I know how hard you're working," was drawing a line I never thought she'd draw. But I had a presentation. Not just any presentation, the presentation. We were finalizing the IPO strategy for our European expansion. The CFO of the parent company was flying in from London. Missing this would be career suicide. So I made a decision. At 5:45 p.m., I was in a glass conference room, laser pointer in hand, guiding executives through margin projections and expansion forecasts. I told myself I'd call Clara later. I'd explain, she'd understand. Emily always made her understand. I didn't get home until after 10. The house was dark. There was no note, no plate in the microwave, no birthday balloons, just silence, thick and final. I climbed the stairs and peeked into Clara's room. Her bed was made, neatly, too neatly. She was gone. I turned to Emily's room, our room, but the door was closed and locked. I didn't knock. The next morning, Emily was gone before I woke. Clara's room looked untouched. A strange unease settled in me. like a thread unraveling slowly in the chest. Around noon, my assistant forwarded me a link. "Have you seen this?" she wrote. "It's powerful and kind of familiar." I clicked. It was a video, black and white, minimalistic, quiet, titled, "What It's Like to Grow Up Without a Father, Even When He Lives With You." Clara's face appeared, framed in soft light, eyes steady, voice calm. "I used to think dads were superheroes," she began. "Mine wore suits, traveled the world, had very important meetings. I told my friends he saved lives, that he built hospitals. That's what I imagined he did while I danced in front of empty seats." I froze. "Eventually," she continued, "I stopped asking him to come. Not because I stopped hoping, but because hope hurt more than silence." The video was 7 minutes long. She never said my name, not once. She spoke of missed birthdays, empty chairs, apology gifts still in their packaging. She recited the lines I used to say. "Next time, I'll make it up to you. Daddy's working to give you a better future," like they were nursery rhymes. Hollow, familiar. Midway through, Emily appeared. Her voice was soft, filmed in profile, hands folded. "He was never cruel," she said. "He was just gone. You can't build memories with a shadow." Twist 3 hit harder than I expected. The video wasn't just for family. It had been made public. Within hours, it had gone viral. Tens of thousands of views, hundreds of comments. People called Clara brave, poised, articulate. They called me the invisible father. A provider, not a parent. I wasn't named, but I didn't need to be. Everyone who knew us knew. The next board meeting was a blur. I could feel eyes flicking to me and away, whispers in the hallway. A colleague offered a quiet nod and muttered, "Hang in there." Hang in there? I was unraveling. At home, no one mentioned the video, not Emily, not Clara. They went about their routines as if it didn't exist, as if the entire world hadn't just peeked inside our house and judged me. I tried to talk to Emily one night, sitting at the edge of the bed while she folded laundry. "I didn't know she felt that way," I said, voice cracking. I was doing everything for her. For you." She didn't look up. "No," she replied. "You were doing everything for your idea of us, not the reality." "I'm still here," I said weakly. She folded a shirt, smoothed it. "You've been leaving for years, Michael. You just didn't pack a suitcase." That one sentence stripped me bare. Clara still wouldn't look at me. A week later, she came downstairs in a hoodie, earbuds in, backpack slung. She paused by the door, not to hug me, not to say goodbye, just to leave her keys on the counter. "I'm staying at Grandma's," she said flatly. "It's easier." She didn't slam the door, she didn't cry, and just like that, my daughter left. No drama, no screaming, just absence. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at those keys. They were pink, plastic, with a tiny ballet shoe charm, a gift I'd bought on a layover once, thinking it would make up for missing a recital. Turns out, it was just weight she didn't want to carry anymore. The call came during a quarterly financial briefing with shareholders from Hong Kong. I felt the first vibration in my pocket, just as the lead analyst was presenting Q3 risk projections. I ignored it. The second came during my own segment, Capital Strategy for the Coming Fiscal Year. I slid my phone deeper into my jacket. By the third buzz, I was visibly irritated. I gave the slightest shake of my head and pushed forward, talking over graphs, deflecting questions with polished ease. It wasn't the time. This was the moment I'd been preparing for over the past 2 years. The expansion deal was critical, Personal brand, company confidence, global prestige. The fourth call broke my focus for a second. I glanced down. Emily, 5 missed calls. I kept talking. By the 7th ring, something cold slid into my stomach. I paused, mid-sentence. My mouth kept moving, but my brain had frozen. I excused myself, barely remembering what I said. Apologies. Restroom, jet lag, something. In the hallway, I finally answered. Emily's voice was shaking. Clara's in surgery. She was hit by a car. They think her leg, her voice cracked, might not recover fully. She was crossing the street after practice. Where the hell have you been? I didn't answer. She hung up. I stood there, surrounded by glass and steel, the hum of muted conversations in the background, and felt like the air had been pulled from my lungs. I could still hear my own voice from minutes ago, explaining dividend options while my daughter was being wheeled into an operating room. When I arrived at the hospital 2 hours later, the nurse at the desk looked up, her expression unreadable. "Michael Bennett," I said, breathless. "My daughter, Clara Bennett. Room?" She checked her chart. "She's in recovery. Only immediate family allowed earlier. Her mother's been here." "I'm her father." She hesitated. She asked, "Not to have you back there right now." I blinked. She said, and I'm quoting, "I don't want him to see me in pain if he couldn't see me on stage." The words hit harder than I expected. I tried to nod, but my neck wouldn't cooperate. The nurse softened. "She's sleeping now. You can leave her a note." Emily came out of the room an hour later. Her face was tired but steady. She didn't say hello, just handed me a folded piece of paper. "She was awake for a moment," she said. "She thought you might come eventually." I opened the note slowly. Inside, in Clara's handwriting, clear, deliberate, no anger, just truth. "You never saw me dance, so you don't deserve to know where I live." No greeting, no signature, no goodbye, just that. I stared at the page, read it again and again. The ink didn't blur, but my vision did. "She's going to her grandmother's once they discharge her," Emily said quietly. "She'll stay as long as she wants. Maybe forever. It's her choice." I nodded, because I had no right to argue. "I wasn't trying to keep her from you," Emily added. "But I can't make her forgive something she still lives with every day." There was a silence between us. It was deep, settled, permanent. "Do you know what she asked the nurse when she woke up?" Emily asked. Her voice trembled slightly. She said, "Is my dad dead?" I looked up. She thought it was the only explanation for why you wouldn't come. The hospital corridor buzzed faintly in the distance. Someone paged a doctor. A coffee machine hissed. I stood there, paper in hand, and realized something I'd refused to believe until that moment. This wasn't about forgetting a birthday or missing one performance. This was about years. Years of silence. Years of absence dressed as productivity. Years of me thinking that presence meant providing. Clara didn't need a provider. She needed a witness. And now, even in her pain, she didn't want me to see her anymore. The divorce papers came in a manila envelope, hand-delivered by a courier at 8:17 a.m. There was no note, no conversation, no dramatic scene in the kitchen. Just a signature already filled in on Emily's side. A blank line waiting for mine, and a checklist of property divisions that made our life together look like a spreadsheet. I stared at it for a long time. The ring on my finger felt heavier than usual. I didn't open the folder for the rest of the day. That evening, the HR director requested a brief meeting. I thought it might be about Clara. Perhaps someone at the office had heard. Rumors, maybe. Instead, She slid a printed article across the table. The headline was simple, but the subhead caught my breath. Teens viral video about absent father sparks debate on workaholism. Who is the man behind the silence? It didn't mention me by name, but readers connected the dots quickly. Online sleuths tracked down photos, timeline details, my LinkedIn profile, a screen grab from an old company event showing me beside Clara, smiling, oblivious. In less than 48 hours, I became the unwilling face of emotionally absent parenting. The company's comms team scrambled to issue a neutral response. We support work-life balance across all departments. That did nothing. The next board meeting was somber. My name wasn't called for the speaking segments. No eye contact. No questions directed my way. By Thursday, I was informed that the board had unanimously agreed to request my resignation in the interest of brand protection. No thank you. No parting ceremony. No severance package. Just an NDA and a 30-day window to vacate, I signed. What else could I do? In 1 week, everything I had spent 3 decades building vanished. My phone buzzed constantly. Emails, journalists, podcasts asking for comment, friends offering awkward apologies. One message from a college roommate simply said, "That's rough, man." I deleted the apps. What I didn't delete, what I couldn't delete, was Clara's note. You never saw me dance, so you don't deserve to know where I live. I read it every morning, every night. Sometimes I tried to imagine where she might be. At her grandmother's, yes. But what was she doing? Did she still practice ballet? Did she laugh at Emily's jokes? Did she sleep peacefully? Did she miss me even a little? I doubted it. I didn't blame her. One night, I sat at the kitchen table. Our kitchen table, though it now felt like a relic, and stared at that folded piece of paper under a magnet on the fridge. I hadn't moved it since the day I brought it home from the hospital. It lived there like a flag, or a scar. The doorbell rang. It wasn't Clara. It was a neighbor holding a newspaper. "You okay?" he asked gently. "Didn't want to text. Figured I'd check in like a human." I nodded. "Trying." He hesitated. "I saw the video. I didn't realize—" I waited for the end of the sentence, but it never came. He patted my shoulder and left. The next day, I tried to log into my company email. Deactivated. The access badge I kept clipped to my belt? Useless now. I cleaned out my office in silence. No farewell party, no cards. Just 2 interns pretending not to look at me as I packed books no one else wanted. At home, I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside was Clara's first drawing of our family. Stick figures, all holding hands. A sun in the corner. "Dad," written in crayon above my head, under a giant tie. I ran my finger over the paper. The edges were worn, faded. She used to draw me into everything. Now she wrote me out completely. Emily hadn't spoken to me since the hospital. The divorce was proceeding quietly, efficiently. She didn't ask for alimony, just the house and full custody, even though Clara was already living elsewhere. I didn't contest it. I had nothing left to bargain with. One evening, I played Clara's video again. This time I let the comments load. This made me call my dad after 5 years. I wish I could explain this to my father, but he'd never understand. "You're so brave. Thank you for putting this into words." Hundreds like that. Thousands. And none of them from me. Because what could I say? "I'm sorry" had expired. "I didn't know" was a lie. And "I'll do better" had been used up years ago. The only truth left was silence. And somehow, even that felt too loud. 3 weeks after I handed in my resignation, I sold the car. A black sedan with leather seats, Bluetooth everything, and a smell that had somehow resisted fast food and sweat for nearly 8 years. It was the kind of car that looked like success. I handed the keys to the buyer, smiled for the sake of civility, then walked home. Home was no longer the 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs. Emily kept that, per the divorce agreement. Clara's childhood room remained untouched, I was told, except for the missing posters, the emptied closet, the ballet slippers no longer hung on the doorknob. I moved into a studio apartment in a gray brick building where nothing was new, but everything worked just fine. It had no dining room, no yard, no guest space. Just one window and a mattress on the floor. And peace. Real peace. Not the quiet you mistake for peace when you're too tired to notice you're lonely. I sold the watches, the suits, the framed awards. I cut the cord on my corporate phone plan and started carrying a flip phone. I didn't need the world to call me. I didn't want to be reachable, not by investors, not by former colleagues, not by anyone trying to pretend like we were still part of the same system. Then I walked past a flyer posted on the bulletin board at the neighborhood community center. Beginners Adult Ballet, Wednesdays and Fridays, 6:30 p.m. No experience needed. All ages welcome. I stared at it for 5 minutes. Dance had always seemed frivolous to me, an elective, not a vocation. But that was before I saw what it meant to Clara, before I saw what she had built without me. The next Wednesday, I showed up. The receptionist didn't raise an eyebrow. "Room 2B, she said with a smile. "Your shoes are in the basket to the right." Don't worry, most of the class doesn't know left from right either. Room 2B smelled like wood polish and echoes. Mirrors lined the front wall, and soft piano music filled the air. There were 12 of us. 6 women, 4 men, and 2 teenage boys who looked vaguely humiliated to be there. Then she walked in. Clara. Hair in a tight bun, black leotard, posture like stone. I froze. She didn't look at me. She didn't flinch. She just called out, "Let's warm up." She hadn't recognized me. Not yet. Or maybe she had and chose not to let on. My body moved like rust. Ankles tight, back stiff, arms unsure where to go. She gave no special instructions, no glances, no comments. I followed as best I could, a middle-aged man trying to mirror grace he had never practiced. Twist 6 was this. Clara was the lead instructor, and I was just another lost man in soft shoes. I kept coming back. Every Wednesday, every Friday. She never said my name, never corrected me directly. But sometimes, just sometimes, her gaze lingered for a second longer on me during pliés, as if trying to confirm something she wasn't ready to admit. On the 4th week, a girl from the class, maybe 20, maybe younger, raised her hand mid-rehearsal. "Miss Clara?" she asked. "Can I ask something?" Clara nodded. "Do you believe people can change?" The room fell quiet. Clara took a long breath. Her face didn't move, but something in her shoulders shifted. The girl added, "I mean, like really change. Not say sorry, but actually become someone better." No one looked at me, but somehow everyone did. Clara looked down, then back up. Her voice was steady. "I think people can change," she said, "but not everyone does. And sometimes it takes too long." The girl nodded. "Did your dad ever say sorry?" Clara blinked once, then a pause. Then, "That's not the part that matters." "Did you forgive him?" Clara stared straight ahead, at the mirror, at herself, maybe at me. Then quietly, "That's complicated." She dismissed the class early that day. I stayed behind to help gather mats and props. She didn't stop me, didn't speak, just moved past me like a whisper that hurt. On my way out, I heard one of the teenagers ask, "Was that your dad?" Clara didn't answer, and I didn't turn around. Instead, I walked home in silence, my feet aching, my arms sore, my heart more full than it had been in months. I hadn't spoken to her, hadn't earned anything back, but I had stood in her world, on her terms, without asking to be seen. And that, for now, was enough. The first letter I wrote to Clara wasn't particularly poetic. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't plead or explain. I just wrote. Today, I walked 4 miles to a community pantry because the bus never showed up. My shoes were soaked, but it reminded me of when we used to jump in puddles. You were 3. You wore your rain boots on the wrong feet. I laughed so hard I dropped my umbrella. I folded the note carefully, slipped it into an envelope, and mailed it to her grandmother's address. I didn't know if she was still staying there. I didn't expect an answer. The next week, I wrote again. Every letter was like that. A moment from the present, a quiet memory. A lesson I never had the sense to teach when she was still small enough to listen. No apologies. No manipulation. Just the truth, as I lived it. One painfully honest day at a time. Sometimes I told her about the volunteer work. I'd started helping at the neighborhood resource center, stacking canned goods, cleaning fridges, teaching budgeting workshops to young parents who still had time to get it right. Other times, I wrote about my ballet classes. I never mentioned that she was there. That was a boundary I wouldn't cross. I didn't know if she read them, didn't know if they made it past the front door. But I kept writing. Then I recorded a video. I sat in the tiny kitchen of my studio apartment, the hum of the refrigerator loud in the background, the light harsh and unfiltered. I built the life I wanted, I said into the camera. Then realized I had no one to share it with. I paused. I don't need you to forgive me, I need you to know I see it now. All of it. Not just what I missed, but why it mattered. I didn't send it directly. I uploaded it to a private link and included the link in one of my letters. No title, no context, just, if you feel like it, watch this. Weeks passed. No response. Until one Saturday, while helping restock a storage room at the center, I noticed a new flyer pinned to the corkboard. It was for a charity performance, Dance for Hope, an evening of movement and meaning. Below the title was a photograph, black and white, stark, beautiful. Clara. Mid-leap, her arms extended, face tilted upward, hair loose in a way she never wore it as a child. The caption read, "Captured at last year's event, choreographed by Clara Bennett." Twist 7 hit like a quiet thunderclap. I stood there, still gripping a box of canned beans, staring at the image. One of the center directors walked by and said, "Incredible, isn't she?" I nodded. "She donated the photo," he added. "Said she wanted it displayed here." I blinked. "Here?" "Yeah." Said this place helped someone she cares about. Figured it was fitting. I didn't respond. 2 days later, I got a text from Emily. "She asked me to bring you to the fundraiser." No emoji, no added commentary. Just that. I stared at the message for nearly a full minute before typing back, "Why now?" Emily replied a few seconds later. She said the man in the photo deserved to know he wasn't invisible anymore. I didn't cry. Not then. Not until later, when I was alone, back in my studio, sitting on the edge of the bed and holding the letter I'd written that same day, one I now wouldn't have to send. At the fundraiser, the venue was dim, elegant, full of people who dressed in quiet sophistication. There were candles, soft music, a slideshow of dancers rotated on a screen near the entrance. When Clara's image came up, people stopped, stared, whispered admiration. She didn't perform that night. She curated, introduced, watched from backstage. I didn't approach her. That wasn't the agreement. But during intermission, someone tapped my shoulder. I turned. It was Clara. She didn't speak, just handed me a program. Inside, next to the list of choreographers, someone had penciled in one line: "Thank you for still showing up." She walked away before I could respond, and that was okay. Sometimes healing doesn't come with violins or reunions. Sometimes it arrives on soft paper, in quiet rooms, with words you never expected to read. I stayed for the entire show. When it ended, I clapped the hardest of anyone in the room. The night of the fundraiser was neither warm nor cold. It sat in that in-between space, the kind of weather that doesn't require a coat, but reminds you to bring one just in case. I arrived early. Too early. My hands were in my pockets the whole time, thumbs twitching against the seams of my jacket. The venue was a renovated warehouse turned performance hall. Industrial ceilings, exposed brick, black-painted beams, chairs in neat rows, a modest stage draped in gray velvet. People filtered in wearing black suits and muted dresses. There was wine, cheese cubes, conversations that buzzed softly, like polite bees. Clara was already backstage. I knew that. I didn't expect to see her until the lights dimmed, if at all. And I certainly didn't expect her to acknowledge me. She didn't. When the show began, a host stepped onto the stage and welcomed everyone. She read a mission statement about art, about healing through movement, about the importance of safe spaces for young dancers. Not once did she mention my name, or Clara's connection to me. That wasn't what this night was for. Clara emerged mid-program. She wore a slate gray ensemble, her hair slicked into a severe bun. Her posture, as always, was perfect. She stepped to the center of the stage, lifted a microphone, and introduced the next piece. "This next performance," she said, "was created with our students. It explores repetition, effort, and grace under pressure. Sometimes, things we practice alone become more powerful when shared." Then she nodded once, and the music began. 4 dancers stepped forward. 1 boy, 3 girls. They moved slowly at first, measured, deliberate, and then I recognized it. Twist 8 wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. But it split me open. They were performing the sequence I had stumbled through for weeks in beginner ballet class. The one Clara had taught in silence, with no acknowledgement that her father was sweating and stumbling 3 feet in front of her. Now it was polished, reimagined, executed with elegance. A gift, or maybe a signal. The final movement, an extended arabesque followed by a simple turn and bow, mirrored the pose I had never quite gotten right. And at the end, the dancers all turned away from the audience toward the back of the stage, arms raised, not in triumph, but in offering. They held the pose in silence. The crowd applauded. I didn't clap, not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't. My hands stayed folded in my lap, my head bowed, not in shame, in reverence. Later, as people mingled and sipped and complimented the performers, I stood in a far corner near the coat check. I didn't want to leave, but I didn't belong in the center of it either. I wasn't part of the applause. I was part of the reason this performance existed in the first place. I had given her pain. She had turned it into art. I don't know how long I stood there before I saw Emily walking toward me. She wore navy blue, the same dress she used to wear to church events when Clara was younger. She looked the same, yet different, sharper, steadier. She held 2 cups of tea and offered me one. We didn't talk at first, just stood side by side watching the crowd. Finally, she said, "You didn't cry." I shook my head. "Didn't need to." She sipped. That was her choreography. I know. She said she wasn't sure if you'd recognize it. I smiled faintly. I did. A pause. Then Emily said something that landed harder than I expected. "You've stopped pretending." I turned to her. "What do you mean?" She looked at me carefully. "You used to pretend you were doing all of it for us, that every hour, every trip, every missed birthday was part of some long-term plan we'd all be grateful for eventually. But it was never about us. It was about not being poor again. About not being your father." I exhaled, slow. "That's true. But now," she said, "you're not pretending anymore. You're not playing the role of the devoted father. You're actually doing it, quietly, without expecting applause." She looked back toward the stage where the dancers were laughing, hugging, basking in the light. "You've stopped trying to earn her back," she added, "and started showing up just because she exists." I didn't reply, because there was nothing to say, and because, for once, silence was the right answer. The email came on a Tuesday morning, 9:12 a.m., subject line, a question. Sender, clarabonoreply.com, her professional address, linked to her dance nonprofit. It was the same one listed on flyers and newsletters. I never expected to see it in my inbox. The message was short. "Can I ask you something as my father?" That was it. No greeting, no explanation. But it was the first direct communication from Clara in over a decade. My hands hovered over the keyboard for several minutes before I typed, "Yes, anything." Her reply came the next day. "I'm choreographing something new for our channel. We're filming a piece on reconciliation. Not verbal, just movement, no labels, no introductions. Just 2 people learning to listen without speaking. Would you be willing to dance with me?" There was no drama in her words. No guilt, no sentimentality. Just an invitation. A professional one, almost clinical in tone. But underneath, I could feel something raw. Something careful and cautious and terrifyingly brave. I said yes. We began meeting every Thursday evening over Zoom. At first, our conversations were technical. She sent over warm-up videos, tutorial links, audio files. She broke the choreography down into digestible sequences and emailed detailed notes. "Keep your chin up in the turn. Let the breath carry the movement, not your shoulders. Yes, that elbow placement is better. Don't overthink the reach. Just feel it." There were awkward silences, plenty of them. But week after week, those silences became softer, less heavy. Occasionally, she asked how my knees were holding up. Once I asked what music she was listening to lately. She didn't answer, but the next week, a playlist link appeared in my inbox. We never talked about the past, not directly. It hung between us, acknowledged but untouched, like a third partner in the dance we were creating, and she still hadn't told me where she lived. That, I understood. Rebuilding trust wasn't a single moment. It was repetition. It was showing up even when you didn't know if it mattered, and showing up again after that. 3 months in, she said, "We'll shoot in the studio next week. You're ready." "I'm still clumsy," I replied, grinning. She smiled. Not a full smile, just a corner twitch, but it felt like sunlight. "I don't need perfect," she said. "I just need present." Twist 9 came the following Monday. Clara sent me the link to the published video with no subject line, no message, just the hyperlink. The title was simple: 2. The video opened in black and white. 2 dancers, one younger, one older, facing away from each other, backs straight, arms loose. As the music started, soft piano, minor chords, the dancers moved in opposite directions, mirroring each other's motions but never touching. Their feet traced the same patterns in reverse. Their bodies reached for each other without looking. Halfway through, they circled inward, a slow rotation, eyes locked. Then, at the crescendo, they stepped forward in sync and finally, tentatively, joined hands. The final pose was simple, a single lift. Nothing flashy. Just one person leaning back into the support of the other. Eyes closed, held, fade to black. Then white text appeared. "This is the only man I trust to walk me down the aisle." I didn't move for a long time after the video ended. I just sat there, the soft click of my desktop clock, the only sound in the room. No one had ever said anything like that to me. No one had ever needed to. But Clara had. And she had said it without words, without sentiment, without pity. She had said it through motion, through trust. The video went viral in a day. Comments flooded in, thousands. Strangers praising the honesty, the grace, the vulnerability. People guessing at the meaning. Some knew. Some didn't. I didn't reply to any of them, because that moment wasn't for them. It was for her. And me. The following week, she called. Not emailed, not Zoom, she called. "Hey," she said, voice steady. "I saw the comments. People think we're actors." I chuckled. "Maybe we are. Bad ones." A pause. Then she said, "Would you come to dinner? Grandma's house, nothing formal." "Of course," she added. "I'll send the address. Please don't share it." I wanted to cry. I didn't. I won't, I promised. That Friday, I stood on the porch of the house where I knew she had spent most of her teens. The door opened, and she stood there. Not as the choreographer, not the instructor, not the poised performer. Just Clara. She didn't hug me. Not yet. But she said, "Come in." That was enough. Emily was there too. We shared a meal. Something simple, warm. We didn't toast. We didn't talk about therapy or regret or milestones. We talked about movies, about Max, the dog, about how none of us could cook as well as Grandma, who sat at the head of the table pretending not to watch our every move. It was awkward. It was perfect. After dinner, Clara walked me out to the porch. "I don't know what this is," she said, "or what it will be." I nodded. "We don't have to name it." She looked at me. "But I want to keep trying." "So do I." The wind picked up slightly. The air smelled like old wood and lavender soap. She looked down at her shoes, then back at me. "Just so you know," she added, "I haven't picked a wedding date, or a dress, or anything." I raised an eyebrow. "But you picked me." She nodded once, and then quietly, with a voice so soft I almost didn't hear it. "I trust you now." The auditorium was modest. 200 seats, folding chairs, no stage lights. Just a single podium, a handheld microphone, and a banner taped to the wall behind me. Fatherhood and forgiveness, breaking the cycle. I stood there in my gray button-down shirt, no tie, no suit, and stared into a room filled with tired eyes. Some belonged to fathers like me, worn down, hollowed out by guilt they couldn't quite name. Others were sons and daughters who'd grown up in the absence of men who said they were doing it all for the family. I took a breath. "My name is Michael," I began, "and I used to think being a provider was the same thing as being a parent." No one interrupted. I told them everything. Not the polished version, not the corporate one. I told them about Clara's recitals, about the empty chairs, about the voicemail from Emily I didn't hear until it was too late, about how you can be in the same house with someone for years and still be a stranger. I missed her life, I said, and she missed having a father. The silence in the room was heavy, but it wasn't judgmental. It was shared, understood. I didn't get a second chance because I deserved it, I added. I got it because she was brave enough to let me try again. When I stepped off the stage, a young man, maybe 20, maybe younger, stopped me. I haven't spoken to my dad in 6 years, he said. Do you think it's too late? I looked him in the eye. No, I said. But don't wait another day to try. Later that year, I launched the Clara Bennett Foundation, named not just in honor of my daughter, but for the millions of kids like her, children who grow up with physically present but emotionally absent parents. The mission was simple: offer free dance, art, and emotional resilience programs for youth navigating parental neglect or distance. It wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about shame. It was about creating spaces for kids to express what they couldn't yet explain. We partnered with local studios, schools, and shelters. I used what savings I had left to fund the first year. After that, grants started coming in. Then donations. We hosted workshops on grief, storytelling, creative expression. We built a small studio in the back of the community center. Kids came. They danced. They painted. They started to smile again. I never ran it alone. I hired staff smarter than me, counselors more compassionate, teachers more patient. I took out the trash. I handed out snacks. I filled out forms. And then came Twist 10. One afternoon, while updating donor files, our program director walked into my office holding a new hire packet. You didn't tell me, she said, smiling. Tell you what? She handed me the paper. Clara Bennett, Executive Director, Remote. I blinked. Wait, what? She's been consulting for 3 months, the director said, remotely. Set up the mentorship program, redesigned the outreach model, rewrote the curriculum for our storytelling class. I stared at the name, my daughter's name, on company letterhead, on my desk. She doesn't come in, the director added. Never seen the office, doesn't do video calls. But the kids know her name. They write her letters. She replies to every single one. I didn't know what to say. Later that evening, I told Emily over dinner. We'd started having meals together once a week. No titles, no expectations. Just 2 people who had once shared a life and were now slowly, kindly reshaping it. She's the executive director, I said. Emily didn't look surprised. She told me, she said. Didn't think it mattered to tell you yet. She never comes in. She doesn't need to. I nodded slowly. Then Emily smiled, softly, wryly. Just like you, she said, leading quietly, affecting everything without standing in the spotlight. I chuckled. Guess it runs in the family. She said you built something she could believe in, Emily added. That matters more than whether she clocks in at 9 a.m. That night, I walked to the studio. There was a mural on the outside wall. Bright, messy, hopeful. Kids had painted it with handprints and favorite quotes. In the corner, in small black letters, was a phrase I recognized. Sometimes showing up isn't about being seen. It's about being felt. No signature. But I knew who wrote it, and I knew who it was for. The envelope was ivory, thick with weight and warmth. My name, Dad, was written in Clara's handwriting, cursive, steady, unmistakable. Inside was a single card, a soft blue border, delicate gold lettering. At the center, just below the announcement of a wedding date and venue, was a handwritten line. "Don't be late this time. I'll be the one waiting for you." I stared at that sentence longer than I should have. It wasn't a jab. It wasn't meant to hurt. It was a reminder, wrapped in grace. 10 years ago, I had been late to every moment that mattered. Birthdays, dance recitals, Sunday breakfasts, quiet walks to school. Late, not in time, but in presence. Now Clara was giving me the only moment that mattered most. The aisle. The honor. I arrived an hour early. The chapel was small, filled with light that filtered through old glass. No organ, just a pianist in the corner, playing soft chords that barely touched the air. The guests took their seats slowly, all familiar faces. Emily sat in the second row, elegant in silver, her hair swept to one side. She glanced at me as I passed. No words, just a nod. Then Clara appeared. She didn't wear a veil. She didn't need to hide. Her dress was simple, fitted, designed to move. Of course it was. She was still a dancer, even today. Always would be. She reached for my arm at the end of the hallway. "You okay?" she asked, eyes teasing. "I'm terrified," I whispered. She smiled. "Good. You'll remember it." We walked slowly. I could feel her hand trembling ever so slightly against my jacket. The moment stretched, not with nerves, but with meaning. At the altar, she let go. She turned. She said, "Thank you." Nothing else. That was enough. We didn't talk much during the reception. She was busy. There were speeches, laughter, cake. Her new husband seemed kind, gentle, exactly the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. But before the night ended, Clara approached me with her phone. "I uploaded something new," she said. "Final vlog." I raised an eyebrow. "Final?" She nodded. Time to close the chapter. Twist 11 arrived not with shock, but with stillness. The video was titled, "How Forgiveness Saved Me, Not Him." It opened with Clara seated in a quiet room, the light soft behind her. No makeup, no filters. Just her. "I used to think forgiveness was about making someone else feel better," she began, like handing them permission to skip accountability. "But that's not what it is." She looked into the lens. Forgiveness is about freedom, your own. It's about saying, "You don't get to live in my heart as a wound anymore." The video cut to clips, childhood photos, grainy recital footage, letters on paper, and finally, the dance. The one we performed together. "I forgave my father," she said. "Not because he deserved it, but because I did." She paused. "And now? I'm no longer the girl who waited. I'm the woman who chose to walk forward anyway." The video ended with no music, just silence. And then, 2.8 million views. Thousands of comments. From daughters, from fathers, from people who had been both. I turned off the screen and sat in the dark, the quiet humming around me like a lullaby. She hadn't made it about me. She'd made it about healing. And in doing so, she had given us both something more powerful than apology. She had given us release. The final scene came 2 months later. The nonprofit hosted its annual summer showcase, a stage built in a park, strings of lights above, foldable chairs lined up under the sky. The kids danced, laughed, stumbled, performed with joy. Emily arrived early, as usual, bringing lemonade and extra napkins. Clara came late, as usual, carrying last-minute props and handwritten programs. And I just showed up. No clipboard, no title, just a seat in the front row. The final number was called Reunions. It was choreographed by one of Clara's students, age 13, nervous, radiant. As the music started, the dancers ran into place. Light, graceful, fearless. And then, something unexpected. Clara walked on stage. Not to perform, but to join the line of dancers. She reached out her hand. One by one, the children joined her. No spotlight, no bow, just unity. When the dance ended, the crowd stood. I clapped, and as I turned, I realized something. I was no longer clapping alone. On one side of me sat Emily, her hand resting gently on mine. On the other, Clara leaned her head against my shoulder, eyes closed, breath steady. No one was missing anymore. We weren't perfect, but we were whole.